Good afternoon. My name is Adam Janelle, Chief Corporate Communications Officer for Liberty Bank. On behalf of Liberty Bank, welcome to CBIA's Leadership Series today. We're a proud sponsor of the Leadership Series. For those of you who don't know, Liberty Bank is headquartered in Middletown, Connecticut, and we are proudly celebrating our 200th anniversary, making us the oldest and largest mutual bank in the country. Part of that success is because we're strong community partners and we support organizations like CBIA. I have the honor of introducing our speakers for today. So I'd like to introduce Odonnell Company. With headquarters in Connecticut for over 25 years, Odonnell Company is a communications firm focused on change for the better in marketing. Now I'd like to turn it over to the Odonnell team.
Thank you, Adam. Hi, everyone. Thank you, CBIA, for having us here for the Leadership Essential session. And thank you, Liberty Bank, for sponsoring today. In our presentation, Attention to Action, we will focus on creating effective communications by getting attention, connecting on shared values, and ultimately driving a desired action. Quickly, we'd like to introduce ourselves. We're from Odonnell Company, as Adam said, which is a marketing firm focused on consulting and communications work that has a positive impact on human life. And today you will be hearing from Eileen Odonnell, the co-founding partner, Michaela Chatel, a Senior Director of Strategy and Planning, and myself, Jalynne Costin, a Junior Project Manager. So before we dive in, let's first take a look at why we communicate. Whether it's to educate or learn or sell or buy a product, we know everyone here may have a different communication need, and there are so many different types of communications, including emails to employees, ads to customers, or if you're recruiting a new employee, the list can go on. But no matter the reason or the audience, we all have a common goal of communicating effectively. And all communications have some things in common, and in order to be effective, they need to get attention, connect with the audience, and spur some type of action. And if we do all of that well, we can then build belonging. We're going to spend some time on each of those elements, looking at why it's important, how it works in the brain, and provide some examples of how to apply that thinking in real life. We will run through some prepared slides, and then at the end, we really hope to hear any questions. So with that, I'll hand it over to Eileen, who will dive into the first step to effective communication.
Thanks, Jalynne. So to communicate, we must first capture attention. And attention is the most valuable asset that we have. We experience only what we pay attention to. We remember only what we pay attention to. And it's also a very limited resource, making it a rare and precious commodity. It's necessary for learning, for interaction, for decision-making. And where we focus our attention actually shapes our perception and our life experience. So given our attention is this very rare commodity, it certainly then makes sense why there's so much competition for it. Let's look at the competition we face when we aim to communicate with virtually anyone. What's vying for our attention today in any given internet minute? We have 299 million Teams meetings that are occurring, 51 million emails sent, 138 million reels are viewed, almost 19 million texts are being sent out, 6 million Google searches, and 3.5 million YouTube's viewed. That's a lot that's kind of going on around us all the time. And because capturing attention is so critical to efficiently communicate, we need to understand how attention works in the brain. Our brains are constantly scanning the environment for two things to be aware of or threats, and then things that are actually of value to us. So in all this clutter of what's coming at us at all times, below the surface of consciousness in our brains, we can tune it, the subconscious can tune us into things that will benefit us. So here's how. All the information that flows into our senses must be triaged. Everything we hear, everything we see, our brain's determining what's important, what's urgent, and then what's kind of throwaway noise. There's a structure deep inside our primitive brain that's operating below that level of consciousness, the basal ganglia, and it will step in to play traffic cop. And this means that rather than allow the sensory information that we're collecting to all go straight into our prefrontal cortex, our thinking part of our brain, this structure in the subconscious will turn our focus in on some data and filter out what's unneeded. So our subconscious decides what we consciously pay attention to. I'm going to say it again because it's so fascinating to me. So it's our subconscious that decides what we will consciously pay attention to. So when the brain determines something's worth noticing, it's saying, hey, and driving your attention to it. So we've all kind of experienced this in our own everyday life where something important to us all of a sudden seems to pop up everywhere. An example is, let's say you are picking out your next car and you've spent all this time trying to figure it out, and you finally decide on this one red car, and you go and you buy your red car and you're out and you're excited, you're driving your red car, and then suddenly you see another red car just like yours, and then another one. It feels really odd because suddenly you're seeing that thing that you chose suddenly show up everywhere. But the reality is, your brain has determined that this is now a thing of value to you. So at the subconscious level, your brain's saying, hey, wake up, pay attention, and focusing your attention on what it feels you care about. Red cars. Okay, so how we use this knowledge about our brain for effective communication to make sure we get attention. There's a few things that all of our brains are kind of wired to tune in for. One thing is things that create a sense of urgency. That's why you see something like now, today, countdowns, 3 days left. Our brains will naturally want to, feel that and respond. Bringing forward a problem to solve without eliciting fear. Problem solving is valuable to our brains because it gives us practice. It also can provide a small reward if we get an answer or an aha moment. So problems that we're invited into are valuable to us. Asking a question. Questions will actually focus the entire brain in coming up with an answer. And then anything that is beneficial to us that we would see as a benefit. This could be benefits at work. It can be rewards, things that are free or discount, saving, anything new, novel, first out. These are all things that our brains will tend to deem as beneficial and worthy of waking up to pay attention to. Michaela?
Great. So getting attention is just one part of effective communication. We also need to connect with our audience. And we do that through connecting through shared values. So again, let's look at how our brain works. Our brains are only 2% of our body's weight. So it's almost nothing, right? Yet our brains require 20% or more of every calorie we consume and every breath we take. That's not just for sort of heavy duty thinking, that is for daily operations of this high powered machine in our heads. To put this in perspective, your brain is 10 times more expensive to maintain than muscle. So like any machinery that needs a lot of power, it's expensive to run, right? So it needs and really values high levels of efficiency. One way our brain stays efficient is by creating sets of neural networks. These are these little connected paths in your brain, right? And these networks are wired together and working together to complete specific tasks. These networks can be really efficient at doing the same thing over and over. However, for the brain to do something new, it requires communication between different networks. And to do that requires 35 times more power. So think of this as, right, like eating the same breakfast every single day requires much less thought and energy as having to think of something new to eat each day, right? Because of the power it takes to run our brains, it makes sense why we highly value shortcuts for efficiency. It's why we think it's so important to connect on values, because those shared values, it's an ultimate shortcut that we can take to communicate and inspire action. Here's an example of what I mean. Let's say I really value research and cost savings and quality, and I'm in the market for a new computer. Well, I'd have to read reports, go online, make the spreadsheets, consider all of my options and study those costs to feel like I was making an informed decision. But if you have a friend who's really tech savvy, has those same values, your brain can leapfrog all the energy it would take and spend and take action because you know their values. You can shortcut past the risk and look at just their recommendation and be able to follow that, feeling like you know that you are aligned. So how do we find shared values? To do this, we must not only understand the audience's values, but our own, our company's. We need to dig deep and determine what is most important to us. and then dig just as deep to understand our audience. Because it's in the overlap between these two sets of values that there are areas where we can really make a connection. This is the foundation of every great relationship, every partnership, every communication, are those shared values. When we find that we share values with an organization or a person, our brains give an okay to connect. So certain things happen. It's like a switch that toggles on in the brain. It limits our amygdala activity. And the amygdala is the area in the brain where it's your fight or flight response, right? So it limits that activity and it activates your prefrontal cortex. Prefrontal cortex, this is the area in the brain where we can think, we can plan, we can make decisions and take actions. And it's the area we want working if we want people to take some action or do something different. Shared values, it's a shortcut to get audiences in a mode where they feel safe enough to listen and to do something. For example, you are all here today on this webinar because you trust CBIA to bring forward content that supports you. And it's because you share values of CBIA, of leadership, of learning in business. Here's another example. We know there is so much news coming at us every day, but we often choose our source based on the values that the newscaster or announcer brings forward. We look to see what they believe in, and if our values align, we pay attention and really hear them. We truly tune in to those who we tend to connect on a values level with. So how do we put this into action? We spend the time to deeply understand and define our core values as organizations. We carefully think about and get to know our audiences, whether that's internally or externally. We understand and we seek to understand what matters most to them. And then we look to find what's that overlap. There's a reason why so often we start conversations with neutral, potentially overlapping topics, things like weather, kids, sports, entertainment. It's so we can find areas where there's an overlap and connection so that then we have an opportunity to move to the next level of communication. Back to you, Eileen.
Thanks, Michaela. So we get attention, we connect with our audience, and we want to be able to ask them to do something. Because when we aim to communicate, we usually have some aim in mind. We have some objective at the heart of that communication. And it's really important to think, what's the intention of this communication? What's my objective? What's the outcome that I'm hoping for? And knowing that outcome that we want up front is important in an efficient communication. So what action do I want the audience to ultimately take? Anything new, as we were talking about, anything new that we want from the audience, it's costly to that audience. It's an expenditure of energy, it's risk, it's attention from the brain. It requires a tremendous amount of work. It's easier to plug into the existing networks and wiring to do what we always do than to take a risk to really do anything new. So our brains want to follow this approved wiring and use existing neural networks whenever possible. So this is an area where we employ brain science to overcome this. And our methodology works to move audiences to an action-oriented mindset. So for each communication we're sending out, we want to ask the audience to take a small, low or no risk action. What happens in the brain when we do something new, no matter how small, and nothing goes wrong? We get just a happy little hit of dopamine. It's just a little burst of happiness for our brain. And it's why we feel good when we accomplish something or complete a task. It's why many motivators will tell you, make your bed first thing in the morning, because doing that one small thing without any adverse impact will provide a reward in the brain and will compel you to want to take that next action. So it's good energy and it preps us for the next thing to do. So our communication systems really work to get the audience to take these small, low or no risk actions as we lead up for a bigger ask or a change that we want. Getting the audience to feel positive rewards each time they engage and take these small actions, it allows the brain to build those pathways needed to complete a larger task and a larger ask. So each communication should find that way to connect, get attention, and then offer at least a small action to initiate this action-oriented or transactional conversation. Like so much of what goes on under the surface in our minds, we don't even realize what's occurring as we take these micro actions, and how when things go well, or at least don't go wrong, we tend to follow that same path again over time and build these very transactional habits. An example to help visualize this. So the first time you drove a car, every decision would have required complete focus. So when the light turned green, you made an active decision, lift your foot up from the brake, press on the gas, and then the car would have moved forward. There wasn't a crash, there's no sirens, and your brain gave you that happy hit of dopamine. And it also, at that point, recorded that small series of actions. It created a little script with that series of actions. So by repeating those steps, the brain then begins to hardwire the sequence of actions so they become automated. So fast forward to today, you can probably drive all the way to work without even remembering it. You can maybe be scheduling your day, or thinking about grounding your kids or learning a language while you're actually doing that drive, because you have free brain space. It's all scripted. So small actions followed by rewards causes us to remember and repeat, and then your brain's energized to take even more actions. So how do we put this into action in our communications? Simple things can make a difference to get audiences in an action-oriented mindset so that the connections are built around your brand or around your communication effort. Something like getting people to laugh, to share, or subscribe, asking someone to consider something new. Have you thought about something? To answer, to go to a link. Asking them about themselves requires action. It puts them in the mode of action or response. And then we always appreciate, acknowledge, celebrate, thank any actions that are taken. These simple actions that do not require a huge expenditure of effort allow us to build a little reward system that creates trust and that action mindset that we really need with the audience to ask for greater things over time. Michaela?
All right, so here we are. We broke through, we got attention, we built trust with our audience through shared values. We have them starting to take small actions and feeling good about it. So what's next? Building belonging. Belonging allows us to attract those with shared values, to communicate with efficiency, and to inspire loyal champions who help share our messages. This is not only efficient, it's exponential, and it works because it is a core human need. So let's go back to the beginning of time, right? The beginning of our existence, where human beings have sought to belong. They needed the safety and support and the connection because in the deepest parts of our brain, the parts responsible for our survival, it was really wired to seek that belonging. In fact, our brains determined it was as critical to our survival as food or shelter. Because our brains believe this at the core level, we were subconsciously obsessed with being part of a group or tribe or organization or family. But because our brains require that safety, there was a constant and unending fear of isolation because it put our survival at risk. Of course, we know we have evolved. We look a bit different. We may look cool and calm, but at the deepest core levels of our brain, the part that signals that fight or flight, it's just as vigilant as if there's that saber-toothed tiger right next to us. So as much as we change and as happy and as comfortable as we might be, our brains are still seeking that social safety or belonging every day, every minute, as if our lives depend on it. And knowing this, it really does start to make sense why people are so passionate about the teams that they cheer for, the companies they support, even the jeans that they wear. It's all about belonging. So here's how that looks in the brain. Again, deep within the innermost parts of our brain. It's the hypothalamus that rewards us when we belong by sending oxytocin to different parts of our brain. Now, it's not only inhibiting that fight or flight defense system, telling you you're safe, you're okay, you can take action, but when we're surrounded by the shared values and in a state of belonging over time, this oxytocin release will work to develop new neural network connections. So as we talked about, we know those networks are preferred by the brain because they're efficient. When people feel safe and like they belong, they can listen, they can learn, they can follow instructions, they can plan, solve problems, they can be creative, and they can try new things. If you can create an environment with a sense of belonging, you are securing attention, connection, and future actions because you're giving people something that their brain inherently requires. And really, with loyalty, you get shared culture and audiences who align with where you're heading. And they can be potentially champions to help you spread the word. It creates a ripple effect, allowing you to not only communicate with your audience, but inspiring them to help spread the message much further. So belonging really is an ultimate efficiency. A great example is Jeep, right? So for all Jeep drivers out there, right? Jeep has successfully created a community of belonging. Jeep owners have a strong sense of their role within the Jeep community, right? This is the tradition of, whether it's them waving to each other as they pass on the road, or the newest trend, which I love, is placing little rubber duckies on another Jeep as a friendly gesture. So Jeep has created a clear brand identity, and it invites owners to have an active part of creating their culture. This sense of belonging, it breeds inspiration, and it makes the Jeep community one that people want to belong to, and owners become advocates, and any communication is exponential in its reach and impact. So how do we create belonging? To keep audiences engaged and bought in to our organizations, our companies, our brands, we need to make people feel invited, make them feel included, and make them feel important and special, because developing advocates and asking for their help in sharing your messages or your goals, it requires an intentional, active, and consistent approach, but the payoff is worth it. Back to you, Eileen.
Thanks, Michaela. So a few more thoughts here as we're further along. So we can't do a presentation on communication without bringing up AI. A couple of interesting facts from one of our favorite AI tools, Claude. OpenAI has estimated that AI could generate as much content as all of Wikipedia's articles in just a few hours. In social media, meta tests show that AI creators can produce 5 times more content than manually. LinkedIn reported those using AI writing assistants posted 18% more frequently. So we know that AI can generate massive amounts of content, but we still only have one brain, 24 hours a day, same amount of attention that we always had, right? So we're entering this time when the production of content and messaging may be growing exponentially. There's almost endless amount of inputs to take our attention. And we've got more channels and tools to communicate than any other period in history. There's now infinite ways to connect. But that makes the human part of the connection more important than ever before. All these communication tools and messages are just not helpful if we cannot break through here, up in the human mind. We're still talking to humans. We still need to break through to connect with people. And to do that, we need to be clear about who we are, who we're speaking to, and what we want out of our communication. Michaela, back to you.
All right, so to wrap it all up, we have shared a lot of information, a lot about the brain. We even talked about saber-toothed tigers and red cars. But this is really part of our process on a daily basis. In all of our campaigns and initiatives we develop, we truly seek to understand the why behind how people make change. And we tap into the brain science because we know it can make communication really effective. So I want to just take a moment, though, and bring it back to the everyday activation of these principles. Provide just a quick summary of the steps we've talked about to be able to communicate effectively. So first, all about getting attention, right? We said there's tons of competition for our attention these days. We know the conscious pays attention to what your subconscious tells it to. So how do we break through? How do we get attention? We know bringing forward benefits, knowing what really matters to our audiences allows us to highlight what they need to hear, right? Creating urgency, making them want to act now, right? That it triggers something in your brain that says, okay, I'm going to pay attention to this. We offer opportunities for audiences to help solve problems or ask a question to them and let them answer that question, because it gets them actively involved and actively thinking of and engaging. So most importantly, we know that to get attention, we must pay attention. We need to show interest. We need to understand where people are coming from in any of our audiences. Second is connecting on values. So identifying your core values, right? What matters to your organization? What do you want to be known for? What are your non-negotiables? Really taking the time to write them down, to collectively agree on them, and then live by them, right? It's a really important exercise. And then just as importantly, understanding your audience's values. What do they need? And where can you see that overlap with what your organization values and what they need, what they value? Because then it's really about the consistency of communicating with these core values, core tenets, driving everything you're doing and saying. Doing this, it fosters that amazing shortcut we talked about for people to help you build trust and loyalty with anyone from staff to a consumer base to partners. The third is all around rewarding an action. We talked about, we know our brains love rewards. They like that hit of dopamine or oxytocin, and it's how we solidify those neural connections, the things that can make things, more automated. So to make it easier to give a reward, we ask for small, no-risk actions. It's a great way to be able to reward audiences, whether they're just clicking on a link or liking a post, being able to provide positive feedback and that reinforcement. And the key here is it can be small. It's the simple, nice job, thank you, that really do light up our brain and drive more action, because people want to keep seeking that feeling. They want to keep seeking that reward. And last and most important for long-term communication is building belonging, creating a community and culture that encourages your audience to stay apart and stay engaged, developing those advocates who will go out and share your message, whether it's bringing people into your organization or selling a certain good or service. This approach has an exponential return on the investment of your time and energy, because you have other folks out there doing the work with you and for you. So with that concludes our prepared slides. First, we wanted to just thank CBIA, Liberty Bank for sponsoring, and thank you all for joining us. We really appreciate your time, taking time out to share, and we invite any questions or thoughts you might have, because really we'd love to hear from you all. And you can add questions into the Q&A section here, but we'd love to hear from you all. We know that we learn best from sharing experiences and sharing, what works, what are challenges. So if there's anything that you, let's start a conversation here of, what have you found that works? What challenges are you still trying to solve? We know right now, business communications, there's a lot going on, but we find it's always exciting to sort of think through these challenges, and we'd love to hear from you. So please feel free to add questions in the Q&A section of the webinar. I see a couple notes in the chat. Okay, what is your suggestion when you're working with an actively disengaged group? It's a really great question, and I don't think you're the only one who has it. I think that, it is challenging when folks don't feel you're not getting the sense that people feel engaged, and whether that's from an employee perspective or, I think I'll sort of answer it. I'll start to answer it from that perspective, but then Eileen, definitely jump in. I think one of the core things is looking at why are they maybe disengaged? What do they need? What challenges are they facing? And sometimes that involves asking, right? It involves asking and having dialogue and understanding what is leading to sort of the disengagement, whether that's internally or externally. But that would be sort of a first sort of thought I would have is trying to get a little deeper and understand it. Yes, seeking to understand.
I agree, Michaela. I think it's almost like sometimes and it depends on if that's an internal, somewhat captive audience or an audience out in the wild where you have to first get their attention. If you already have their attention because they're a somewhat captive audience, we would probably go back to the base of trying to figure out the shared values, what's important to them. And so you'd be looking for that either conversation or some way to collect inputs in a really neutral way. Just want to understand what's important, what's going on with you, what's in your world. And when you can collect that information, then you can look and say, okay, what's important to the organization? What's important to these folks? Whereas even if it's one connection point that you're trying to find, like we both care about your future, let's figure out how to go from there. So it's really trying to find that overlap. It's very hard to get attention, and there are some communication campaigns we've done where it has to get to compliance, which is a different level. So you have here's the things we want to inspire them with, where we're putting that more aspirational messaging out that's about the connection. And then sometimes there are compliance things. This is how long you have to get it done. So it can do the full range where you're bringing urgency to it near the end. Okay, that was a long answer.
All right, let's read this next one. How would you navigate working with what might now refer to as a dinosaur employee, not willing to conform or change, and also with the millennials who feel entitled and don't pull their weight? Okay, there's a lot in that question. I think I think across the board, looking at the fact that regardless of age or experience or whatnot, we all come to our workplaces or our buying power, whatever it may be, with our own sort of personal experiences, right? And they're all human experiences, and there are connection points across ages, across experiences. And I think that is where looking back at those sort of shared values, trying to find opportunities to connect, maybe two different groups that you think might not have as much overlap, might be sort of a place to start.
Yeah, I'll jump in too, Michaela.
Yeah.
I think you're right. And this one can go to belonging too. So we need you. If you've been with this company for decades, you hold the culture in your head and your heart, and we need you to engage and change and help us move change forward, and helping them understand the vision of why this change is good, right? It's kind of a change management question, or change leadership along with communication along that path. So here's where we're headed. Here's the value you bring. You belong here. You know this culture really well. We're evolving, and we need you in the mix. We need you to change with us, getting their buy-in, yes, so that you can help us. We need your help to get this forward. Change is not a choice for a business. Change is not a choice. We don't get to stay the same or we're gone. So that's almost like, here's the baseline of what we all have to operate from. Then for employees from younger generations, it can be, we need you. We need your talent. You bring something very special, and we want you to be open and interested, get other perspectives. It is really challenging in like never before, I feel like, in terms of managing all the various generations together. But we do need all different brains working on the problems today. They're complex. So we need everybody in the room. We need the ones that are there for a long time to, open up and think about where we're headed. Things are changing. They're going to keep changing. We are going to go forward. Come with us. We need you. And then for newer folks we need your time. We need your energy. We need your focus when you're here. If you're not in it, there's going to be other people making the decisions. We need you to help us decide the future. So getting that engagement. Sorry, I'm going on too much again.
No, that's great. And I agree that in the comment that, getting their buy-in, exactly, getting them sort of engaged. Absolutely. I'm just reading a couple other.
Raving fans, I have not. I will look for that one. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, guys. Showing the data. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Some people
Always.
respond really well to having proof, right? As Eileen said, their change is going to keep happening always. And that can feel uncomfortable for people, right? We talked about sort of all of these things happening in your brain. Change feels like a risk. Change can feel like a risk to your, to your safety. And so getting their buy-in and supporting it with information to show them why, I think that's really smart, showing that data.
Yeah, or giving them the problem. We are putting together a work group with different generations to help us solve how we get the most out of everyone. There's a lot of things coming at us. There's thoughts about different groups. Let's all get together and let's come up with some strategies and some approaches, right? Hear different ideas.
Yeah, actually that goes well to the question that was just added. What are some strategies you use to gain buy-in? I think a great one you just gave is exactly that, is getting them engaged, and not assuming that you can solve the problem for them, when in fact a most effective strategy is getting them to help solve the problem for you, and helping, making sure that they feel an active participant and ownership over the sort of strategy to sort of gain buy-in.
Yeah, and if it's a large scale change in a company or something that over time you need to get everybody on board, you are determining and able to say, here's where we're headed exactly. Here's some of the steps. You are making sure you know upfront who the dissenters will be, the tougher people to get buy-in, and who your advocates will be. You're pulling them in earlier and you're looking at some of your informal communication systems to get those activated with really consistent messaging, and then making sure you have some checkpoints. There are some, we can't always get buy-in from everybody. And we do a lot of different projects, some of them where there is tough situations with buy-in. It's sometimes asking a question, like, can you see any reason why this would benefit you? If you get them to have to answer it, sometimes that can help. If you have a really, really tough crowd, it's kind of giving them back the answer, because some people will just react to, I don't want to hear you tell me what to do. So it's really asking them, why should someone do this? Why should someone make this change? Why do you think this would be important?
That's great. I have another question here. If an organization or department feels stuck, do you think it is helpful to gather staff, all levels, to generate ideas and strategies, or does it show weak leadership? It's a really interesting question.
Such a good question.
It's such a good question.
I just feel like it's never weak to learn or to ask people, or this, my personal opinion is, I so rely on all the different minds in our company, and ultimately the leadership has to make final decisions, but you benefit so much from hearing all different inputs and opinions. And so I think it's a real show of strength to gather input and just say, we're taking a moment. And there's all different business environments where taking a moment becomes really important. When you have radical change going on in a business environment, whether that's because of technology or regulatory thing, all different reasons, those are great moments to say, wow, right now we are listening. We are going to be able to respond fast. I need ways to get input from all of you to see what's mattering to you, what's important. We still stand for the same core values. We are standing strong in this. This is who we are, but we need input because we need to be able to respond to what's going on.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think sometimes that's just the framing of how you present a meeting like that. How you present a meeting like that is that you're seeking because they are part of this, and that you want to hear from them, but being able to, to your point, allow for input without it being, it's not their responsibility to solve it, but it is in their best interest, and it is, you value what they have to bring to it, right? So if they can
That's a great
share,
point.
then you can go back and as a leadership, as a leader or leadership team, you go back, you take those inputs, and that allows you to still be the responsible one. You're still the one in charge. You're still the one who has to make the choices.
You don't give people a problem they can't solve, right? So I think that's a great point, Michaela. It's not, the point isn't to like hand over the responsibility, but to collect the inputs, the valuable
Exactly. Oh, we have a nice comment in here. A strong leader is proud of a totally engaged team. Absolutely. And exhibiting that they don't know everything, but may have a teammate who can resolve a problem or add positivity to a situation.
Yeah. Just give you a different, it's like a kaleidoscope, right? And I always see the inputs as like these different little gems in the kaleidoscope, and you could turn it this way and see a solution, or another way. So the more of those inputs that you're able to get, sometimes you don't need a lot, but it's just being able to shift perspective a little bit and look at things from a different angle. It's really valuable.
And one note, because I do know, obviously, in this room, we probably have a lot of different sized businesses, right? And I think something to think of is that even if you can't get everyone in a large organization or something, if you can't get everyone, having representatives, right? Having a group that gets together that are sort of can represent certain teams, right? This might represent the sales team or the IT team, right? Having representatives, because then you can create the belonging within that group, and they can go back and bring that sort of engaged feeling back sort of to the masses. Okay, subject matter expert, giving someone a chance to become the expert on things and allowing an organization builds trust in you as well as your team. Absolutely. Yeah,
well put. Where you're able to sort of pull people up into greater roles, and you leverage different skills in the organization, so that now you're almost spreading out the knowledge and the communication and the leadership. I don't know.
Yeah. And I think people will often rise up to expectations that are set when they feel like those expectations are set in confidence in their skills, right? So if somebody feels like, you think I'm a subject matter expert at this, guess what I'm going to do? I'm going to be a subject matter expert in that, like, right? And so it allows people to have ownership of that and really add value to your team, but also find confidence in their own work, in their own sort of what they're contributing. These are great comments and questions.
Yeah. Yeah, I wish we could do this every week with you guys. It's so interesting to see the different challenge areas. And, with each of these too, it's like we're answering, but I'm sure there's a bunch of circumstances, or depending on how big the situation is or what the situation is, there's all different approaches for sure.
And one thing I'll just note, because I think it's important, we talked a lot about like the brain science and sort of what is happening and why these things matter. But I think it's important to sort of note that a lot of these things are like, you're probably doing them, right? You're probably doing these things inherently if you're trying, as leaders, trying to bring people in. And so you're doing these things, but sometimes understanding why certain things work, because it does sort of tap into that, I think is really helpful when we look at things like, recruitment and retention, right? We know that that is a area that's so important into our businesses, is attracting the right talented. And I think that that's, understanding these things, you can help sort of make sure that you're engaging in those in those areas. I see another question in here. Struggling with poor open rate on emails to our audience despite changing subject lines and trying different tactics. Any advice? Great presentation. Thank you. That's a great question. I want to sort of remember back to the slide that was shared about how much is coming at us every day, right? The overwhelm of emails and meetings and things like that that are coming at us every day. It is hard in that email inbox. It's hard to get attention. And so I think, good to be sort of testing out and changing subject lines and looking at those different tactics. But I hear that is a challenge that we continue to sort of see. And I think going back to some of those things that we noted about attention, about maybe asking question, the urgency, those things to sort of bring forward and test those out and see if any of those sort of help get to,
if you know what is valuable to the audience, if you have a really wide ranging audience, it's tougher. If you know this segmented group values X and this one values that, then you'd be kind of breaking them up and doing a lot of testing. And if you could get information from them, it's so almost one of these questions where I'd like to have some more information, but because if they're just going out and this audience didn't sign up for that, that's one thing. If they did, and you have an opportunity to, it's again, collecting information. We like to know as much as we can about, we want to know, what they eat for lunch, what time they get up for breakfast, what channels they use. We want to know everything about our audience, because how else are we going to get that little connection point with them? And sometimes it can be surprising what will break through. So understanding that audience is, and if we don't have an understanding, then it's doing a bunch of testing, I think, and trying some of the basics.
What else? This is great. I know we have about 10 more minutes. So if there are other questions or thoughts that you wanted to share, I want to, make sure we have the opportunity for that. And if not, that's okay too. I know everyone is busy. Sometimes the the gift of 10 minutes in between meetings might, be warranted. And if that's the case, absolutely no problem. I just will say thank you again for everyone for taking the time out to join us, and really appreciated the thoughtful questions and comments here in the chat.
Thank you, CBIA, and thank you, Liberty Bank, so much. This was really lovely for us to spend our lunch hour with y'all.
Yes. Thank you all. Have a great day.
Thank you.